Our next story is set in Georgia. It's a Black Sea nation straddling West Asia and Eastern Europe, and it is at a crossroads. On Saturday, the country went to polls. It was called Georgia's most crucial election since the country's independence. It was less about choosing parties and more about choosing between the West and Russia. Most exit polls showed a close election. In the end, Georgia's ruling party won the election with 54% of the votes. The president has now accused Russia of meddling. She says Moscow orchestrated an election fraud. So were Georgia's elections rigged? And what does it mean for the country's future? Here's a report.
This is Georgia, a South Caucasus nation bordering Russia. In 1991, it gained independence when the Soviet Union fell. Since then, it's been a battleground of conflicting interests between the West and Russia. For the last 3 decades, Georgia has been pro-West. It even fought a war with Moscow in 2008. 80% of its people want to join the European Union. Which brings us to the ruling party, the Georgian Dream. It's owned by billionaire Bidzina Ivanishvili. In 2014, it got its first stint in power, and it was seen as a pro-European party. During the first term, it enjoyed close relations with Brussels. But things changed in recent years. Ivanishvili's businesses were in Russia. It's where he made his money. And the party's tilt slowly became visible. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Georgia's government did not support the Western sanctions. It also promoted deeper relations with Russia. What about Georgia's opposition? The biggest opposition party is the United National Movement, or UNM. It was founded by Mikhail Saakashvili. He's a former president who's currently in prison. The opposition calls this arrest politically motivated. Exit polls conducted by Western pollsters predicted a close election, but the result was very different. Not only did the Georgian Dream win, it did so by securing 54% of the total votes. The UNM only managed to get around 10% of the votes. Even with all the opposition groups coming together, they won only 37% of the total votes. This hasn't gone down well with the country's pro-Western president or the opposition groups. Georgia's president says she does not recognize the results and has accused Russia of a special operation.
As the last independent institution in this country, I must clearly state that I do not recognize these elections. Recognizing them would be tantamount to legitimizing Russia's takeover of Georgia.
Observers from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe say that there was evidence of democratic backsliding. Meanwhile, Europe wants a probe into these elections and says there have been irregularities.
Here we have made it clear that the EU expects the Georgian Central Election Commission and other relevant authorities to fulfill their duties, to swiftly, transparently and independently investigate and adjudicate electoral irregularities and allegations thereof. Those irregularities must be clarified and addressed.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin has rejected all accusations of election interference. Moscow says there was no intervention from its side and has instead accused Europe of trying to influence the outcome of the polls. Georgia's opposition has now called for mass protests. It won't be the first in the country. Georgia was rocked by mass protests earlier this year over a controversial foreign agents bill. This election puts the country at a crossroads again. For long, it has deepened its relationship with the West due to the unpopular Soviet sentiment in the country. But the recent tilt towards Russia indicates that Georgia may be in Moscow's orbit again.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election. Explains how America chooses its president. Your primer on the race to the White House. Everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained. Every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.